Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about how I soured the Evil Dead beer. I've used this method tons of times and it always turns out really well, so I wanted to share it with everybody in hopes that they can make a really good sour beer at home. I would like to go over a couple things that I'm sure people will be thinking. They'll say, hey, why are you using grain to sour this? I've heard that people use yeast strains that produce lactic acid. I've heard people use pure probiotic strains that they make a starter and do all this stuff. The reason I use grain is because it contains more than one of the different types of bacteria and yeast. Usually when you use a probiotic and make a starter, it is one specific strain. And that doesn't make your beer very multi-dimensional. It's still sour and it still tastes good, but I think that grain produces a more well-rounded sour beer. The really cool thing about this is that a lot of the process is exactly the same. You mash the same, you brew the same, you ferment the same. It's just that one step in the middle, which just happens to be a 24 to 48 hour rest, that makes all the difference here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and go through the steps. First, you mill and mash, just like you always do. Mill your grains, dough in, mash at whatever temperature is appropriate for the style you're brewing. This beer was a medium body beer, so I just went ahead and mashed in at 152 degrees. Once your standard mash is done, usually 60 minutes, just go ahead and drain everything and collect it into your brew pot. Now here's the first step that goes a little different. We want to bring the temperature down to about 110 degrees to 115 degrees. I like to shoot for 113 degrees, so I set my temperature to 113 degrees and chill everything with an immersion chiller. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add what is making our beer sour. In this case, it's going to be the grain. You want to use about an ounce per gallon of water that you're going to use total. So this batch was about 8 gallons to begin with, so I got 8 ounces of grain. Now you want to make a good seal for your lid to sit on. In my case, I just got a big piece of silicone tubing and I cut a slit down the entire thing. Then I used that slit to stick on top of the pot. For my system to work correctly, I need to have a special lid that I created. The lid has 2 holes in it. One hole is for a CO2 connection and one hole is for an airlock. Once you get the lid on there, you want to put something heavy on it to make sure you have a good seal. You can use anything you want. I use 2 weights. Now you want to stick your airlock on there. This makes sure that no oxygen gets in and destroys all of the cool growing stuff that you have going on during your process. Next, we use a CO2 ball lock connection and connect it to the inlet on the top of the pot. Turn the gas on a little bit and you'll see the bubbles start coming out of the airlock. And you want to give it a good sniff test to make sure that CO2 is actually coming out of the airlock. I want to take a second to actually explain why we're setting up this environment for this grain to sit in for X amount of hours. The yeast and that bacteria will grow in a liquid that contains sugar, just like we created. We made this mash, we gave it a perfect environment for yeast and bacteria to grow in. And if we're not careful, mold will grow in it, bad bacteria will grow in it, and it'll make something that we can't drink. So this process keeps the liquid at a temperature where bad bacteria die and good bacteria grow. It also creates an environment with no oxygen. An environment without oxygen lets the good bacteria also thrive and kills off the bad bacteria. Now all you have to do is wait for your desired level of sourness. This could take between 18 to 48 hours. I've found that 34 to 36 hours is the sweet spot for the amount of sourness that I enjoy. Once you've waited the desired amount of time, you want to go ahead and take the lid off and take a look around. You'll want to first do a smell test and make sure that nothing smells really bad. It might smell a little funky. I've actually had a friend say that my garage smelled like barf when I opened up the lid. It's less barf, but more of a really acidic smell, which can be associated with barf, unfortunately. But in this case, I smelled a really nice kind of doughy, grainy smell with a distinct sourness that you could tell that something in that pot was sour. Next, you want to make sure that there's no bad stuff growing in there. Look around, make sure there's no mold, make sure there's no black stuff floating around. If you see a couple little white specks on top, that's perfectly fine. I see that from time to time. It's just a byproduct of the souring process. But the real test is taking a sip. You always want to take a little sip because you never know until you actually taste it, and you don't want to waste time brewing, fermenting, and doing all this stuff if the product is no good to begin with. So you don't even have to swallow it. Just take a sip, see if it's enjoyable. See, it should be tart, it should taste kind of raw. That's a good thing. Now you just brew like normal. Bring it up to boiling, add your hops, cool it down, ferment it, carbonate it, serve it, and you're good to go. Alright, now that we've gone over the whole process, I'm really excited to see if anybody can take this and make their own sour beers. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'm more than happy to answer because I've done this quite a few times. I just wanted to share this method with everybody because I want everyone to be able to make their own really good sour beer at home. That makes me happy. It makes me happy that you're happy. So, until next time, I'll see you later.